What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I wanted to answer a question about Modern Warfare that I've had from the moment I saw these two characteristics on an attachment, and this is going to be, what is the difference between idle sway and aiming gun steadiness? There's been a lot of confusion and a lot of misinformation being spread about these two particular mechanics, so today it's time to clear the air on these two and let you guys know which one does what exactly. So let's start it off with idle sway, because idle sway is something we've always had in Call of Duty, and it's a pretty simple mechanic. Idle sway is that figure eight sort of a movement that you tend to see with guns when you aim down sight. And normally things like SMGs, for instance, will have a higher amount of idle sway, and then more accurate guns tend to have less idle sway. And like I said, this has been in every Call of Duty game, this is nothing new to us. And this is why I was really confused when I also saw aiming gun steadiness, because from the sounds of it, that sounds pretty much like what idle sway does. It's the steadiness when you're aiming down sight. However, it does turn out they're actually very different mechanics, but they do interact with each other quite a bit. A lot of the speculation was that idle sway was moved into the hipfire category, so it didn't apply when you're aiming down sight, and it would be the movement of your gun when you're standing there not aiming down sight. But that's not the case at all. Just like with any of the previous Call of Duty games, if you're not aiming down sight, there is no movement whatsoever to your actual aiming reticles. There's only an animation of your gun moving, which is completely meaningless, by the way. So that is not idle sway. No matter how many people tell you that that's what idle sway is, that is not what it is. So what's the answer then? What's the difference between these two? Well, I did a bunch of testing in the beta, and I was mixing and matching different attachments that had different effects on your idle sway or your aiming gun steadiness to find out what actually changed while aiming down sight. And it turns out idle sway is exactly as it's always been in Call of Duty. It's that sort of usually figure eight style movement of your gun, and this will vary depending on the gun that's in your hand. Aiming gun steadiness, on the other hand, is a new variable that I don't think we've ever seen before in Call of Duty, or at least not nearly to the same extent that we're seeing in Modern Warfare, and this is a side-to-side wiggle to your aim as you're aiming down sight. And this works independently of your idle sway. As a result, when you're aiming down sight, you have both idle sway as well as this aiming gun steadiness at work, and this means we see a new pattern when aiming down sight, and it looks something like this. It's more of like a wiggly figure eight, which can definitely be a little bit more difficult to control, although it's more noticeable on some guns than others, and like I said, attachments will play a role in this. So you could stack up on attachments that pretty much eliminate your idle sway, but then you'll still see your aim wiggle from side to side a little bit. On the other end of that, if you stack up on attachments that have a negative impact on your idle sway and aiming gun steadiness, your gun will be all over the place when trying to aim down sight at a target. Which means at longer ranges, good luck hitting your first shot. So between these two variables, which one is more important? Which one do you want to make sure you have the most positives on and you don't want to have too many negatives on? This may come down to personal preference to an extent, but I strongly prefer not screwing with the aiming gun steadiness. Aiming gun steadiness is really hard to counteract and predict and account for when trying to aim down sight, whereas idle sway is generally fairly predictable and it moves in a slower fashion, so you can actually counteract that a little bit. So I really don't mind if I've got some idle sway, as long as my aiming gun steadiness isn't too extreme. And therefore, for me at least, especially on guns where I'm planning on challenging people at longer ranges, I'm definitely going to be staying away from attachments that have a negative impact on aiming gun steadiness. One other thing I wanted to tack on here at the end of the video is the fact that your idle sway and aiming gun steadiness only seem to apply when you're not firing your gun. The moment you start firing your gun, this is when recoil takes over and idle sway gets cut off completely, and as far as I can tell, aiming gun steadiness also gets cut off. And this is how it usually goes with idle sway in Call of Duty at least. And you can actually test this in like Black Ops 4, for instance. If you go into Black Ops 4, for instance, with the Outlaw sniper rifle and you put rapid fire on that, when you're aiming down sight at a wall, you will see the idle sway. You'll be moving around that wall a decent amount. Yet, when you start firing that gun and you fire it at the maximum speed that you can fire it at with the rapid fire attachment, every single bullet will go in the same hole, which means the idle sway disables when you start firing. So that does appear to be the case with both idle sway as well as aiming gun steadiness in Modern Warfare as well. So they really only seem to impact your ability to hit your very first shot on target. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's really quick video. It might seem like a strange one, but this is something I was really genuinely interested in, and I'm hoping a lot of you guys were as well. In either case, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what did you guys think about this? Were you surprised to see that this is the difference between idle sway and aiming gun steadiness? Or were you convinced that it was something completely different? If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.
Yeah.